A single bullet hole marked the no trespassing sign at the edge of Amara Williams' farm, a warning she refused to heed. 3 months of escalating threats hadn't broken her, not the sheriff's intimidation, the mysterious black SUVs circling her property, or even Child Protective Services threatening to take her son Elijah. The Williams farm had belonged to her family for generations, and she'd promised her late father never to surrender it. But when masked men set her barn ablaze, that night, Amara realized she might lose everything. Then a shadow moved against the flames, dropping the attackers with military precision. Her brother Caleb, officially killed in action 3 years ago, stood before her with harder eyes than she remembered. "They picked the wrong family," he said simply, pulling Elijah to safety. What began as a land grab was about to expose buried government experiments, corporate corruption, and a truth that would transform their quiet corner of America forever. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The sun crept over the horizon, casting a golden glow across Amara Williams' farm. Morning dew glistened on rows of vegetables while chickens clucked their way across the yard. In the distance, 8-year-old Elijah darted between tall stalks of corn, his laughter echoing across the property. The scene was picturesque, peaceful yet somehow isolated from the world beyond its boundaries. Amara wiped sweat from her brow as she tightened the final bolt on her father's old tractor. Despite the early hour, her hands were already stained with grease. The ancient machine had broken down again, but a new one wasn't in the budget. Nothing fancy ever was. "Mama, Mama, look," Elijah called, rushing toward her with cupped hands. "I found a praying mantis in the garden." Amara smiled, setting down her wrench to examine his discovery. "That's a good sign, baby. They eat the bugs that would hurt our crops." She watched, her son's eyes light up with curiosity. Being both mother and teacher since pulling him from school last year had its challenges, but moments like these made it worthwhile. "Can we add it to my science journal?" Elijah asked, carefully transferring the insect to a jar with air holes. "Perfect for today's lesson," Amara nodded. "Go set up your workspace on the porch, and I'll be there in 20 minutes to start your lessons." As Elijah scampered off, Amara returned to the tractor. Her father's voice seemed to float around her as she worked. "This land is our bloodline, Amara. Never let go of what's truly yours." Those words had become her mantra since inheriting the 20 acres of farmland 2 years ago after his passing. The crunch of tires on gravel pulled her attention to the driveway. An old pickup truck rumbled toward the house, raising dust in its wake. Amara recognized it immediately and felt her shoulders relax. "Miss Williams?" Harold Whitmore called as he climbed out, his 70-year-old frame still spry despite his age. The white-haired man held up a paper bag. "Thought these might help with that stubborn old John Deere." Amara accepted the bag, finding salvaged tractor parts inside. "Mr. Whitmore, you're a godsend. How much do I owe you?" "Nonsense," he waved dismissively. "Your daddy would have done the same for me." The old man leaned against the tractor, his weathered face turning serious. "How are things? Any more visitors?" Amara's expression tightened. "Not since last month." Harold nodded slowly. Good. Though I did notice a fancy car parked down by Robinson's old place yesterday. Black SUV, out-of-state plates, or no plates at all, actually." "Probably nothing," Amara said, though she felt the familiar knot forming in her stomach. "Probably," Harold agreed, though his eyes said otherwise. "Just remember what your daddy always said about this town's unwritten rules. Some folks around here still think people should know their place." He spat the last words with disgust. They chatted while finishing the tractor repairs, Harold sharing stories about Amara's father that made her laugh despite her worries. After he left, Amara turned to teaching Elijah his daily lessons, though her mind occasionally drifted to the mention of the black SUV. Later that afternoon, while checking fence lines at the property's edge, Amara spotted it, a sleek black vehicle idling about 100 yards down the road, No plates visible, just watching. A chill ran down her spine despite the warm spring air. When she stared back, the driver slowly pulled away. The next day, Amara loaded her truck with produce for the weekly farmers market. These sales kept them, afloat though barely. "Can I come this time?" Elijah asked, already climbing into the passenger seat. Amara hesitated. His last trip into town hadn't gone well, the reason she'd started homeschooling. But keeping him isolated wasn't the answer, either. "Okay, but stay close to me," she said, helping him buckle his seatbelt. The town square bustled with Saturday activity when they arrived. Amara set up her modest stand among the other vendors, arranging tomatoes, zucchini, and fresh eggs with careful precision. "Well, look who's here," a woman's voice called out. Lisa Turnbull, whose family owned the large commercial farm north of town, approached with a tight smile. "Amara, honey, still working that little plot of yours? Bless your heart for trying." "Business is good, Lisa," Amara replied evenly. "People appreciate knowing where their food comes from. I'm sure they do." Lisa's gaze drifted to Elijah, who was arranging bundles of herbs. "And how's the boy? Heard he's not in school anymore." "Such a shame." "He's learning just fine," Amara said, her voice cooling. "Top of his class, actually." Lisa's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course he is." As Lisa walked away, Amara noticed several people watching their exchange. Some quickly averted their eyes when she looked in their direction. Others whispered behind cupped hands. "Mama," Elijah tugged at her sleeve, "can I get water from the fountain?" The water fountain stood just across the square, close enough to watch him. "Straight there and back, okay?" Amara kept one eye on her son while helping customers. He reached the fountain without incident, but as he finished drinking, 3 older boys approached. Though she couldn't hear what was said, their posture told her everything. One boy bumped Elijah roughly, another knocked his cap off. When Elijah bent to retrieve it, a 3rd boy scooped up dirt and flung it at him. Amara was already moving when she saw Elijah gasp and reach for his inhaler. She pushed through the crowd, heart pounding. "Back off!" she shouted, reaching her son and pulling him close. The boys scattered, but not before one called back a word that made her blood boil. As she helped Elijah with his inhaler, a heavy shadow fell across them. Sheriff Dale Horton stood there, thumbs hooked in his belt loops, watching with cold eyes. "Problem here, Miss Williams?" he asked, his voice deceptively casual. "Just some boys roughhousing," she replied, meeting his stare directly. "Seems like trouble follows some folks," he observed. "Might want to keep a closer eye on your boy. Or better yet, put him back in school where he belongs." "We're fine, Sheriff," Amara said, her arm protective around Elijah's shoulders. "Thank you for your concern." The sheriff's mouth twitched. "Just doing my job. By the way, heard you had some irrigation issues last month. Shame how equipment fails sometimes, isn't it?" The implied threat hung in the air as he walked away. That evening, Amara sat at her kitchen table surrounded by bills, property taxes, medical insurance, Elijah's asthma medication, equipment repairs. The numbers refused to add up no matter how she adjusted them. A corner of the table held 3 separate offers to buy her land, all for less than half its value. All from shell companies she suspected were fronts for the same buyer. Each promised financial relief and a fresh start elsewhere. Amara pressed her palms against her tired eyes. A developer had been buying up properties around town for years, mostly from Black and Hispanic families facing hard times. Her father had rejected their offers repeatedly. Now they were after her. Elijah appeared in the doorway in his pajamas. "Are we going to be okay, Mama?" Amara quickly gathered the bills into a pile. "Of course we are. Come here." She pulled him onto her lap, though at 8 he was getting almost too big for it. "This land is our bloodline, remember? It's everything your grandpa worked for and his daddy before him." "But what if we can't keep it?" he asked, his small face serious beyond his years. "We will," she promised, though the words felt hollow, against the mountain of debt before her. Later that night, a knock at the door startled Amara from half-sleep on the couch. She grabbed the baseball bat from behind the door before checking the peephole. Harold Whitmore stood on her porch, swaying slightly. The smell of whiskey was evident when she opened the door. "Mr. Whitmore, everything okay?" "Had to warn you," he slurred, leaning heavily against the doorframe. "They're back, Amara, the land scouts, sniffing around town again." "Land scouts?" Men in suits, asking questions, offering cash under the table for information about properties, about yours specifically. He grabbed her arm with surprising strength. "Your daddy stood up to them. Cost him dearly. Be careful." "Girl!" After Harold left, Amara locked the door and double-checked all the windows. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The next morning, she found an unusual envelope in her mailbox. No postmark, no return address, just her name in block letters. Inside was a military-issue dog tag wrapped in a cloth stained with what looked disturbingly like dried blood. She recognized it immediately, her brother Caleb's. The one word scrawled on the cloth made her breath catch. "Hold on." Caleb had been declared killed in action 3 years ago. His body never recovered. Yet here was his dog tag, delivered by hand with a message. Was it possible? Or was this some cruel trick? That night, unable to sleep, Amara found Elijah sitting by his bedroom window staring out at their fields bathed in moonlight. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, sitting beside him. He shook his head. "Mama, are they going to take our farm?" The directness of his question caught her off guard. "Who told you that?" "I heard those boys in town. They said the sheriff is going to kick us off our land." His voice trembled. "Is that true?" Amara pulled him close, feeling a fierce protectiveness surge through her. "Listen to me, Elijah. This is our home. Nobody is taking it from us. I promise you that." As she held her son, tears filled her eyes. It was a promise she wasn't sure she could keep, but one she'd die trying to honor. The pounding on the front door came at 6 in the morning, so aggressive that pictures rattled on the walls. Amara, who had barely slept, jolted upright from the kitchen table where she'd been drinking coffee and staring at Caleb's dog tag. "Sheriff's Department, open up!" Elijah appeared in the hallway, eyes wide with fear. Amara motioned for him to stay back as she approached the door. 2 deputies stood on her porch, Reynolds and Dawkins, both wearing expressions of practiced indifference. "Can I help you?" Amara asked, keeping her voice steady. Deputy Reynolds held up a document. "We've received complaints about illegal animal keeping on this property, county ordinance violations." "What? My animals are completely legal." "I have all the proper—" "Not according to our reports," Dawkins cut in. "Chickens exceeding allowed numbers, unlicensed goats, improper waste management potentially contaminating groundwater." Amara's mind raced. Her small operation was entirely within regulations. She'd made sure of it after her father died. "This is ridiculous. I can show you my documentation." "Save it for the hearing," Reynolds interrupted. "You're looking at fines up to $20,000 unless these violations are addressed immediately." The amount hit like a physical blow. 20,000 might as well be 20 million. "Of course," Dawkins added with false concern, "if maintaining this property has become burdensome, there are other options. I understand you've received purchase offers." The implication was clear: sell or be bankrupted by fabricated violations. "I'll see you at the hearing," Amara said coldly, closing the door before they could respond. She leaned against it, trembling with rage, until Elijah's small voice broke through. "Are they going to take our animals?" "No, baby," she assured him, though her mind was calculating worst-case scenarios. "This is just a misunderstanding." The next morning brought a more devastating blow. Amara woke before dawn as usual, but when she stepped outside to begin chores, the sight before her stole her breath. The irrigation system her father had spent years perfecting lay in ruins, pipes smashed, water spraying uselessly across the yard. The chicken coop door hung open, birds scattered. 2 goats had escaped their pen where someone had cut the fence, and across her best field of young corn, deep tire tracks showed where a vehicle had deliberately driven through the delicate plants, crushing them. A piece of paper had been nailed to her barn door. The message was blunt: sell now or lose it all. Elijah found her on her knees in the mud, trying to salvage what vegetables remained. Without a word, he knelt beside her and began helping, his small hands working alongside hers. "We'll fix it," he said with childlike determination. "We always fix things." It took all day to round up the animals and patch the worst of the damage. By sunset, Amara's body ached, but a small sense of victory warmed her. They hadn't broken her. Not yet. That feeling evaporated the next morning when a sleek government sedan pulled into her driveway. A thin woman in a pressed suit stepped out, flanked by a uniformed officer. "Ms. Williams, I'm Deborah Mercer from Child Protective Services. We've received concerning reports about your son's welfare." Amara felt the ground tilt beneath her. "What reports?" "Allegations of educational neglect, unsafe living conditions, and possible exposure to hazardous materials." The woman's clinical tone made the absurd claim sound plausible. "We'll need to inspect the premises and interview Elijah privately." "You have no right." "We have every right, Ms. Williams. Unless you prefer I take temporary custody of your son now." The next hour passed in a blur of invasive questions and note-taking as the CPS worker inspected every corner of their home. Elijah sat stiffly at the kitchen table, answering questions with growing distress while Amara was forced to remain silent. Just as Mercer began suggesting Elijah should come with her for further assessment, the front door burst open. Carmen Jackson, Amara's oldest friend and the town's only black mechanic, strode in with a folder clutched in her hand. "Before you continue," Carmen announced, her voice carrying the authority of her 6-foot frame, "you might want to review these documents." She slapped the folder on the table. Complete homeschool registration with the state, Elijah's academic progress report certified by a licensed educator, and medical records confirming his physical health. Also, dated photographs documenting this home's appropriate living conditions. Carmen turned to the officer. "And you might be interested in knowing that entering a private residence with CPS without a proper warrant when there's no imminent danger is a violation of Fourth Amendment rights." The confidence in Carmen's voice made Mercer hesitate. She flipped through the folder with thinning lips, then snapped it shut. "These will need verification," she said coldly. "Verify away," Carmen replied. "In the meantime, I believe your visit has concluded." After they left, Amara collapsed into Carmen's arms, shaking with silent sobs. "They're trying to take everything," she whispered. "My land, my son." "Not while I'm breathing," Carmen promised. "They've done this before, targeting single parents, especially single mothers of color with valuable property. But they picked the wrong woman this time." The following days brought a painful routine: damage in the morning, repairs by evening. Each time Amara fixed something, another problem would appear. Through it all, she and Elijah worked side by side, rebuilding fences, replanting damaged crops, reinforcing animal enclosures. "You're stronger than most grown men I know," Amara told him one evening as they finished mending a fence. The physical labor had given her son a determined set to his jaw that reminded her painfully of Caleb. "I have to be," he replied with simple certainty. "It's just us." The words squeezed her heart. Since Caleb's supposed death, they'd been alone in their struggle. Harold helped when he could, and Carmen had become their fiercest ally. But ultimately, it was just mother and son against increasingly powerful enemies. Speaking of Carmen, the news came 3 days after the CPS visit. Carmen's garage had burned to the ground overnight. Electrical issue, the fire department claimed, though Carmen had recently rewired the entire building herself. The timing wasn't coincidental. Just the day before, Carmen had fixed Amara's truck for free, allowing her to make deliveries to her remaining customers. "This is getting dangerous," Amara told Carmen when she visited the charred remains of the garage. "Maybe you should distance yourself from me for a while." Carmen laughed bitterly. "Sugar, they've been trying to run me out of business since I opened 10 years ago. Only difference now is they're not pretending anymore." She kicked at a blackened tool. "Besides, what kind of friend would I be if I abandoned you now?" The monthly town meeting should have been routine. Budget discussions, road repair planning, the usual small-town governance. Amara normally skipped them, but Carmen insisted they attend this one. "Know your enemy," she'd said. "Besides, staying invisible is exactly what they want." The community center was packed when they arrived. Conversations hushed as heads turned to watch them enter. Amara felt Elijah press closer to her side. Mayor Franklin was discussing seasonal tourism when Sheriff Horton requested the floor. His gaze locked on Amara as he approached the microphone. "While we're discussing community concerns," he began, "I feel it's my duty to address rumors of increased drug activity in our county." A murmur swept through the crowd. "Specifically," he continued, "we have credible information about a property on Old Mill Road being used as a distribution point." Amara's blood ran cold. Her farm was the only residential property on Old Mill Road. "That's a lie," she said, standing abruptly. All eyes turned to her. Sheriff Horton smiled thinly. "I didn't mention your name, Ms. Williams. Interesting that you assumed I was referring to you. You know exactly what you're doing," Amara shot back, her voice shaking with fury. "Just doing my job," he replied smoothly, "protecting this community from elements that threaten our way of life." The damage was done. Throughout the room, people whispered behind their hands, throwing suspicious glances her way. A reputation could be destroyed in minutes in a small town, especially when you already stood out. As they left the meeting, a woman Amara didn't recognize fell into step beside them. "Don't look at me," she said under her breath. "I'm Tessa Nguyen, journalist with the Regional Herald. That was quite a show in there." "Not now," Amara muttered, quickening her pace. "I've been investigating Horton for months," Tessa persisted, keeping pace. "You're not his first target, just his most recent. I think we should talk." "Why should I trust you?" "Because I've got nothing to gain by making your life worse, and everything to gain by exposing corruption. Here's my card. Call me when you're ready to fight back." That night, Amara found Elijah sitting alone in the dark, staring at nothing. "Hey," she said softly, sitting beside him. "What's going on in that big brain of yours?" He didn't look up. "It's my fault, isn't it?" "What is?" "Everything. The trouble." His voice was small. "If I didn't need my medicine all the time, we'd have more money. If I wasn't sick at school, you wouldn't have to teach me. If I was stronger—" "Stop." Amara pulled him into a fierce hug. "Listen to me. None of this is your fault, not one bit. You are the best thing in my life, Elijah Williams. The very best thing." He burrowed against her shoulder. "Then why is everyone trying to hurt us?" Amara had no answer that wouldn't frighten him more. Later, alone in her room, she pulled out the property offers again. The latest one had arrived. Yesterday, slightly higher than before, but still insultingly low. Her hand hovered over the signature line. One signature and their problems would end. They could move somewhere new, start fresh. But her father's voice echoed in her mind. "This land is our bloodline." Signing meant surrendering not just property, but heritage, history, legacy. She returned the papers to the drawer unsigned. Fuck. Smell of smoke woke her hours later. At first, she thought it was a dream, but the acrid scent grew stronger. She bolted upright, heart pounding. Outside, orange flames licked the night sky. The barn, her father's barn, built by his hands, was ablaze. Elijah, she screamed, running to his room. He was already awake, eyes wide with terror. Stay inside and call 911, she ordered, grabbing a coat as she ran outside. The heat hit her like a wall as she approached. Through the smoke, she glimpsed shadowy figures running from the far side of the structure. 3 men in dark clothing, masks covering their faces. "Hey!" she shouted, racing toward them. "Stop!" One turned back, advancing on her. His hand raised, and she realized too late he was holding something. A bat or pipe. "Should have taken the money," a muffled voice sneered as the weapon began its downward arc. Amara braced for impact, but it never came. Instead, a darker shadow emerged from nowhere, moving with lethal precision. The attacker crumpled without a sound. The other 2 men froze, then turned to run, only to be dropped by swift, silent blows. As flames illuminated the farmyard, Amara stared at the newcomer in disbelief. Tall, muscular, with familiar eyes and a harder face than she remembered. "Caleb?" she whispered, reaching out a trembling hand. Her brother nodded once, his expression grim. "Told you to hold on." The barn's flames cast an orange glow across the farm as Amara stared at her brother in disbelief. 3 years. 3 years since the military officers had stood on her porch with solemn faces. 3 years of believing Caleb Williams was buried in some unmarked grave overseas. Yet here he stood, solid and real, his familiar eyes set in a harder face than she remembered. "Caleb?" she whispered again, her voice breaking. "How?" A crash from the burning barn interrupted her question. The roof was collapsing, sending embers spiraling into the night sky. In the distance, sirens wailed. "Questions later," Caleb said, his voice deeper than she remembered. He nodded toward the unconscious men on the ground. "They'll have backup. We need to move." Before Amara could respond, Elijah burst from the house, inhaler clutched in one hand. He froze at the sight of the strange man standing with his mother. "Uncle Caleb?" he asked in a small voice. For the first time, emotion cracked Caleb's stoic expression. "Hey, little man," he said softly. "You've grown." The boy moved cautiously, forward as if approaching a ghost. When he was close enough, Caleb dropped to one knee, meeting his nephew at eye level. Elijah reached out tentatively, touching Caleb's face with trembling fingers. "You're real," he whispered. The sirens grew closer. Caleb rose swiftly. "Inside, now." Once in the kitchen, Caleb closed all the blinds and checked each exit with practiced efficiency. He moved like a predator, silent and alert. When he finally joined them at the table, Amara couldn't hold back any longer. "They told us you were dead," she said, tears streaming down her face. 3 years, Caleb. 3 years of mourning you." Caleb's jaw tightened. "In many ways, I was dead, and I needed to stay that way to protect you both." "Protect us? From what?" Amara demanded. "From the people I crossed paths with during my last mission. People who wouldn't hesitate to use my family as leverage." He glanced toward the window where blue lights now flashed in the distance. "People like the ones trying to force you off this land." "You sent the dog tag," Amara said, the pieces finally clicking into place. Caleb nodded. "When I heard about the trouble here, I knew I had to come. Been watching the farm for 2 days, learning their patterns." "Uncle Caleb was in the army," Elijah said proudly, his fear momentarily forgotten. "He fought bad guys, special forces," Caleb corrected gently. "And sometimes the bad guys wear uniforms too, little man." The fire department arrived, followed by Sheriff Horton's cruiser. From the window, they watched the firefighters battle, the blaze while Horton surveyed the property with calculating eyes. "He's looking for me," Caleb observed. "Those men worked for him." "For the sheriff?" Amara asked, shocked despite everything. "Not exactly. Horton's just a puppet. He works for people with bigger plans." Caleb turned away from the window. "The harassment, the threats, the CPS visit. It's all connected to Vanguard Dominion. The land development company, the one that's been buying up properties. They're more than that," Caleb said grimly. Much more. And they won't stop until they get what they want. My land? Amara asked. What's underneath it? Before he could explain further, a knock at the door made them all tense. Caleb motioned for them to stay back as he approached, drawing a knife from a hidden sheath. Ms. Williams, Fire Department, need to ask you a few questions. Amara moved to answer, but Caleb held up a hand. It's a setup, he whispered. Trust me. Instead of opening the door, he led them to the back of the house and out through a window. They circled around to the edge of the property where Caleb had stashed a nondescript sedan. Get in, he ordered. We'll come back when it's safer. As they drove away, Amara looked back at the farm, her heritage, her home, illuminated by the dying fire and emergency lights. She felt both heartbroken and strangely unburdened. With Caleb back, she was no longer fighting alone. They checked into a motel 30 miles away, paying cash. Elijah fell asleep almost immediately, emotionally drained. In the dim light of the bathroom, Amara finally got a good look at her brother. New scars marked his face and arms. The youthful sparkle in his eyes had been replaced by something harder, more guarded. What happened to you? She asked softly. Caleb's expression darkened. My unit was deployed for what we thought was a standard operation. Instead, we uncovered something ugly, a Black Ops program conducting illegal activities under the guise of military action. When I reported it through proper channels, my entire team ended up dead within a week. All except me. So you faked your death. It was the only way to gather evidence safely. If they thought I was dead, they wouldn't be watching for me. His voice grew hoarse. I wanted to tell you, Amara, but anyone connected to me was in danger. And now? Now they found you anyway. Because of the land. He ran a hand over his close-cropped hair. Dad always said our farm was special. He was right, just not in the way we thought. Amara shook her head. I don't understand. There's a cave system underneath the property, an extensive one. The government discovered it in the 60s during routine geological mapping. What they found inside was valuable enough to kill for. What could possibly be in caves that's worth all this? Tomorrow, Caleb promised. For now, get some sleep. We start fighting back at dawn. True to his word, Caleb began his counter-offensive at first light. While Elijah slept, he spread maps and satellite images of the farm across the motel table. First, we secure the property, he explained to Amara. I'll set up surveillance cameras here, here, and here. He marked locations with precise dots, motion sensors at every entry point. Then we'll need supplies, non-perishable food, first aid, communication equipment they can't trace. This sounds like war preparations, Amara said uneasily. Caleb's eyes met hers. It is war. Vanguard has been systematically forcing families like ours off their land for decades. They hire local authorities, create legal problems, even resort to violence when necessary. And they've targeted our farm because of what lies beneath it. You still haven't told me what that is. Caleb hesitated. Evidence of experiments conducted on rural black communities during the Cold War. Our grandfather wasn't crazy when he talked about government men taking soil samples. They were monitoring the effects of what they'd done. The revelation hit Amara like a physical blow. Are you saying our family was targeted? Yes, along with dozens of others across the South. Vanguard was the private contractor that facilitated it all, and now they're cleaning up loose ends. Elijah stirred in the adjoining room. Both adults fell silent until the boy had dressed and joined them. Time for your first lesson, Caleb told him with surprising gentleness. Today, I'm going to teach you how to know when someone's watching you. Over the next 3 days, Caleb transformed their small family into a tactical unit. He taught Amara how to spot surveillance vehicles, how to move without being tracked, how to handle herself if confronted. For Elijah, the lessons were framed as games, spotting changes in environment, moving silently, finding hiding places. Uncle Caleb, Elijah asked during a practice drill. Were you a superhero in the army? Caleb's laugh held little humor. Nobody. Just a soldier who learned some hard lessons. Will you teach me to fight like you? Caleb exchanged a glance with Amara before kneeling to meet Elijah's eyes. Fighting is a last resort, little man. First you learn to think, to observe, to plan. The best warriors win without throwing a single punch. On the fourth day, they returned to the farm under cover of darkness. The barn was a blackened skeleton, but the house remained untouched. Caleb swept the property for surveillance devices, finding 3 hidden cameras that he carefully left in place but adjusted to show looping footage. They're watching, but now they'll see what we want them to see, he explained. While Amara settled Elijah inside, Caleb set to work. By morning, the farm's perimeter was secured with hidden cameras of his own, connected to monitors he installed. In the basement, motion sensors disguised as garden ornaments lined the driveway. Inside, he assembled communication equipment from components that couldn't be traced. Where did you learn all this? Amara asked, watching him work. Afghanistan, Somalia, places where the enemy blends with civilians and trust gets people killed. His hands never stopped moving as he spoke. I'm sorry to bring this war to your doorstep, but it was already here. You just didn't know it yet. Their first victory came unexpectedly. Caleb's cameras caught Deputy Reynolds planting a package in Amara's truck while she was at the general store with Elijah. When he examined the footage, Caleb's expression turned deadly. Drugs, he said flatly. They're setting you up for a possession charge, probably planning to find it during a traffic stop. Instead of removing the package, Caleb attached a GPS tracker to it and installed a hidden camera in the truck. 2 days later, when Sheriff Horton pulled Amara over for a routine check, the camera recorded everything. The planted evidence, the falsified report, even the call Horton made afterward to report his success. Using an anonymous email account, Caleb sent the footage to Tessa Nguyen at the Regional Herald, along with records he'd gathered, showing similar setups against 3 other property owners who had refused to sell to Vanguard. The story broke like a thunderclap across the county. Though Horton denied everything, the footage was damning. For Sai, the first time, doubt crept into the community's perception of their sheriff. It's a start, Caleb said as they watched the news coverage. But Vanguard won't give up so easily. If anything, they'll escalate. He was right. The harassment became more subtle, but more pervasive. Deliveries to the farm mysteriously disappeared. Amara's bank account showed unexplained holds. Even Elijah's asthma medication was suddenly out of stock at every pharmacy within 50 miles. Through it all, Tessa Nguyen became an unexpected ally, using her journalistic connections to help where she could. At first, Caleb was wary of trusting her. Everyone has an agenda, he warned Amara, even well-meaning reporters. But when Tessa showed up at the farm one evening with a trunk full of supplies they couldn't otherwise obtain, including Elijah's medication, Caleb's suspicions softened. My brother was 18 when the police planted drugs in his car, Tessa explained while helping unload the supplies. He's still serving time for something he never did. So yes, I have an agenda. The truth. That night, while Amara put Elijah to bed, Caleb and Tessa pored over documents she'd uncovered showing the connection between Vanguard Dominion, Sheriff Horton, and a shell company that had purchased 7 properties surrounding the Williams farm. They're creating a buffer zone, Caleb realized. Isolating you completely, Tessa nodded grimly. And they've done it before in 3 other counties. Always the same pattern. Target an area, apply pressure, eliminate holdouts, then buy everything at rock-bottom prices. But why this land specifically? Tessa pressed. What makes it worth all this effort? Caleb hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. Finally, he decided on trust. Come with me tomorrow night, he said. I'll show you. Under a full moon, Caleb led Amara and Tessa to the far corner of the property, where a dilapidated well stood half hidden by overgrowth. Elijah remained at the house under Carmen's watchful eye. the two of them playing board games with the curtains drawn. Dad always told us never to play near this well, Amara recalled as they approached. Said it was unstable. He was protecting us, Caleb replied, removing the seemingly solid concrete cap to reveal a metal ladder descending into darkness. This isn't a well. It's an entrance. With flashlights and rope harnesses, they descended nearly 40 feet before reaching the bottom. Instead of water, they found a narrow tunnel reinforced with steel beams. Government markings, faded but still visible, lined the walls. Cold War era, Caleb explained, his voice echoing. When the government was obsessed with finding underground facilities that could withstand nuclear attack. The tunnel stretched before them, disappearing into the darkness. As they walked, the passage widened into a series of chambers. What they found inside stole their breath. Rusty barrels lined the walls, each marked with military codes and hazard symbols. Abandoned equipment, medical in nature, lay scattered across metal tables. Filing cabinets stood against the far wall, their contents long since removed, except for a few scattered papers. "What is this place?" Amara whispered, her voice small in the cavernous space. "A test site," Caleb replied grimly. "One of many where they conducted experiments that would never be approved through official channels. The perfect setup, remote location, predominantly minority population who wouldn't be believed if they reported strange occurrences." Tessa photographed everything with grim determination. "This is bigger than a land grab," she said. "This is a cover-up," Caleb nodded. "And somewhere in these caves is proof concrete enough to expose it all." They spent hours exploring the underground network, discovering more chambers, more evidence of whatever had happened there decades ago. In the final room, Caleb found what he was looking for, a steel lockbox hidden behind a false wall panel. Inside was a hard drive, sealed in protective material. "Military-grade storage," he explained, "designed to survive decades underground." "How did you know it was here?" Amara asked. "I didn't. But I knew Vanguard wouldn't be this determined unless there was something they desperately needed to recover or destroy." He carefully packed the drive in his bag. "Now we just need to access it." When they emerged from the tunnel, the night had grown unnaturally quiet. No insects chirping, no distant traffic, just silence. "Something's wrong," Caleb whispered, drawing a weapon Amara hadn't realized he was carrying. They approached the house cautiously. Through the windows they could see Carmen and Elijah still playing games, seemingly unaware of any danger. But Caleb's instincts screamed warning. "Take the back trail to Carmen's truck," he instructed the women. "Drive straight to the motel. Don't stop for anything." "What about you?" Amara demanded. "I'll get Elijah and Carmen out. Trust me." As Tessa and Amara slipped away, Caleb circled the house, checking each of his security feeds through a handheld device. The cameras showed nothing unusual, which itself was suspicious. The woods surrounding the property should have registered some wildlife movement. His suspicions were confirmed when he spotted fresh tire tracks behind the storage shed. Too narrow for a car, perfect for ATVs. Someone had scouted the property, careful to avoid his sensors. Caleb entered through the cellar door, moving silently up to the main floor. His appearance in the kitchen doorway startled Carmen and Elijah. "Uncle Caleb," Elijah began excitedly, but Caleb held a finger to his lips. "We need to leave," he whispered. "Right now. No questions." To her credit, Carmen asked none, simply gathering Elijah's jacket and medicine. They were halfway to the door when headlights swept across the front windows. Multiple vehicles pulled into the driveway, doors slamming as men deployed around the house. "Sheriff's Department. We have a warrant." Caleb's mind raced through options. "Back door," he decided. "Stay low." They had just reached the kitchen when the front door burst open. Deputies poured in, weapons drawn. Caleb pushed Carmen and Elijah into the pantry. "Whatever happens, get him to his mother," he whispered to Carmen before closing the door. Then he stepped into the open, hands raised. "Looking for me?" he called. Sheriff Horton entered last, a triumphant smile spreading across his face when he spotted Caleb. Well, well, the ghost returns. He gestured to his men. Secure him. On what charges? Caleb asked calmly, allowing himself to be surrounded. Trespassing for starters, identity fraud, and I'm sure we'll find evidence connecting you to various terrorist watch lists. After all, you've been officially dead for 3 years. Horton's smile widened. Amazing what a man might do when no one knows he exists. Sounds like you've thought this through. Oh, I have. Your sister's made quite a nuisance of herself. But family loyalty is admirable, even if misguided. Horton glanced around. Speaking of family, where is the boy? Safe. From you, Caleb replied coldly. Horton's face hardened. Search the house, he ordered his men. Find the kid. As 2 deputies moved toward the kitchen, Caleb made his move. With lightning speed, he disarmed the closest officer and used him as a shield. What followed was a blur of precise violence. Economical, efficient, and devastatingly effective. When it ended, 5 deputies lay unconscious on the floor. Sheriff Horton remained standing, his weapon trained on Caleb, hands surprisingly steady. Impressive, he admitted, but ultimately pointless. A crash from the kitchen drew their attention. Carmen and Elijah had been discovered. A deputy dragged them into the living room, gripped tight on Elijah's arm. Let the boy go, Caleb said, his voice deadly quiet. Put down your weapon first, Horton countered. The standoff stretched for 3 heartbeats before Caleb lowered his gun. This isn't his fight. Smart choice. Horton nodded to the deputy who released Elijah but kept Carmen restrained. Now, Mr. Williams, let's discuss what you found down in those caves. The sun was rising by the time Amara realized something had gone terribly wrong. She and Tessa had reached the motel safely, but there was no sign of Caleb, Carmen, or Elijah. Calls went unanswered, text messages undelivered. We need to go back, Amara insisted, already heading for the door. Tessa blocked her path. That's exactly what they'll expect. We need a different approach. That's my son out there. And if you rush in blindly, you'll be arrested too. Then who helps him? Tessa's voice softened. Caleb trusted us with this. She pointed to the hard drive they'd recovered. There must be a reason. Reluctantly, Amara agreed to wait long enough to examine their discovery. Tessa connected the drive to her laptop, but her hopes quickly faded. It's encrypted. Military-grade protection. She sighed. We need a specialist. We don't have time. For that, Amara protested. Actually, we might. Tessa made a call, speaking in hushed tones before hanging up with a satisfied nod. My cousin works in cybersecurity. He'll meet us in an hour. While they waited, Amara paced the room, alternating between fear and fury. When a knock finally came at the door, Tessa opened it to reveal a young man carrying a laptop case. This better be worth it, he grumbled. I'm missing a job interview. Lives are at stake, David, Tessa replied, gesturing to the hard drive. Can you crack it? David examined the device with growing interest. Cold War-era storage with modern encryption layered on top. Someone updated the security protocols regularly. He glanced up. This will take time. How much time? Amara demanded. Hours, maybe days. We don't have days. My son is... Her phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. We have your boy. Hard drive for his safety. Abandoned. Factory on Route 16. Noon. Amara showed the message to Tessa, who frowned. It's a trap. Of course it is, Amara agreed. But what choice do we have? While David worked on cracking the encryption, Amara and Tessa formed a desperate plan. They needed allies, people Horton and Vanguard wouldn't suspect. Their first stop was Carmen's network of friends, mostly service workers, farmhands, and others who operated in the background of town life. People who saw everything but were rarely seen themselves. Carmen's been arrested, Amara explained. To the small group gathered in a back room of the local diner. They have my son, and they'll keep taking from all of us unless we stand together. To her surprise, these people needed little convincing. Each had their own story of harassment, intimidation, or injustice at the hands of Sheriff Horton and his deputies. "That man gave my brother 6 months for a broken taillight," one woman said bitterly. "They seized my cousin's property over a permit issue nobody else gets cited for," added another. By noon, they had assembled a small but determined coalition. Through them, Amara learned that Carmen was being held at the county jail on fabricated charges. Elijah was reportedly with Sheriff Horton himself at the abandoned factory, the meeting point for the exchange. As Amara prepared to leave for the rendezvous, David called with unexpected news. "I've accessed part of the drive," he reported. "It's worse than you thought. These aren't just random experiments, they were targeted. The government tested experimental compounds on specific communities, mostly minorities, tracking effects across generations. My father always said the land made people sick," Amara recalled, a chill running through her. "After heavy rains, when the water would rise from deep underground, the compounds are still there, in the soil and groundwater. That's why Vanguard wants the land, not to develop it, but to contain evidence of what happened there." Armed. With this knowledge, Amara and Tessa approached the abandoned factory with a new understanding of the stakes. Their coalition members had spread throughout the town, positioned to document everything and intervene if necessary. Sheriff Horton waited inside the main warehouse, flanked by 2 deputies. Elijah sat on a chair nearby, unnaturally still but apparently unharmed. "Mama," he called when she entered, starting to rise before a deputy's hand on his shoulder forced him back down. "It's okay, baby," she assured him, though her heart pounded painfully. "Everything's going to be okay." Horton stepped forward. "The hard drive. Where is it?" "Safe," Amara replied, "and copies have been made." The sheriff's confident smile faltered slightly. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" "Right now, your communication systems are experiencing technical difficulties." "Isn't that strange?" Tessa added, checking her watch. "And in about 2 minutes, someone from the State Attorney General's office will receive an anonymous tip about irregularities in county property seizures." These were calculated bluffs, but Horton's expression suggested they'd hit close to the mark. Before he could respond, his radio crackled. "Sir, we have a situation at the station. Someone's released footage of the Williams arrest. It's all over social media." Horton's face darkened. "Who authorized—" "Sir, it gets worse. There's a call recording, too, between you and someone at Vanguard." This was no bluff. While Amara had distracted Horton, their coalition had been busy. Carmen's young cousin, a computer whiz with a grudge against the sheriff's department, had accessed the station's poorly secured servers. For the first time, Horton looked rattled. "This changes nothing," he snapped. "You still have no proof of the broader conspiracy?" Caleb's voice echoed through the warehouse as he stepped from the shadows. Somehow he'd escaped custody and made his way here, looking battered but dangerously focused. "You mean this proof?" He held up a small device. "While your men were processing me, I had a lovely chat with a Vanguard executive named Phillips. Seems he's worried about exposure. Offered me quite a lot to disappear again. I recorded everything." Horton's hand moved toward his weapon, but Caleb's warning was immediate. "Don't. There are a dozen cameras on us right now, streaming live. Make the wrong move, and the whole world sees it." Another bluff, but an effective one. Horton hesitated just long enough for Caleb to approach Elijah and guide him toward Amara. "Take him outside," Caleb instructed her without taking his eyes off Horton. "Tessa, go with them." "What about you?" Amara asked. "I need a private word with the sheriff about what I found in those caves." The cold fury in Caleb's voice left no doubt about his intentions. Outside, Amara held Elijah tightly, breathing in the scent of his hair. "Did they hurt you?" "No," he replied. But they said bad things about you and Uncle Caleb. They said our land was poisoned. Amara exchanged a glance with Tessa. There's some truth to that, she admitted, but it's more complicated than they made it sound. As they waited for Caleb, Elijah pulled something from his pocket, a worn journal with faded leather covers. I found this in the attic last week, he explained. It belonged to Great-Grandpa. There are drawings of the caves and notes about the government men who came to test the soil. Amara flipped through pages of meticulous observations, detailed drawings, and increasingly paranoid warnings. Her grandfather had documented everything: the military vehicles, the soil samples, the strange illnesses that followed. He knew, she whispered. All this time, the answers were in our own house. Caleb emerged from the warehouse looking grim but satisfied. Horton won't be a problem anymore, was all he would say about what had transpired inside. Back at the motel, they gathered around David's laptop as he showed them what he'd managed to extract from the hard drive. Decades of classified reports scrolled across the screen. Experiments disguised as agricultural assistance programs, health effects monitored without consent, generations of data collected on unsuspecting families. They targeted communities that wouldn't have the resources to fight back, Tessa noted bitterly. Places where complaints could be dismissed as paranoia or superstition. My father suspected something, Amara said, still clutching her grandfather's journal. That's why he was so adamant about keeping the land, not just for heritage but for evidence. And now we have it, Caleb confirmed. Enough to expose Vanguard Dominion and everyone connected to their operations. As night fell, they formed a plan. The evidence would need to be protected, distributed to multiple sources to prevent suppression. Carmen would need legal help to fight the false charges. Most importantly, they would need to prove the current danger posed by the contaminants still present in the soil and groundwater. There's another way into the cave system, Elijah suddenly announced. Everyone turned to him in surprise. Great-Grandpa's journal shows a map. There's an entrance by the old lightning-struck oak tree. The boy's discovery proved invaluable. The next day, while Horton struggled to contain the growing scandal, Caleb and Tessa explored the second entrance to the underground complex. What they found exceeded their worst expectations. Deep within a previously undiscovered chamber lay equipment far more modern than the Cold War-era technology in the main caves. Someone had been monitoring the site recently, taking samples, updating records, observing the long-term effects of whatever had been buried there. This isn't just a historical cover-up, Tessa realized as she photographed everything. They're still collecting data, still using people as unwitting test subjects. When they returned to the surface, Caleb's expression was thunderous. Tomorrow we take the fight to them, he declared. No more reacting, no more defense. Vanguard Dominion has controlled the narrative long enough. That night, as Amara tucked Elijah into bed at the motel, he asked a question that broke her heart. Are we ever going home again? She smoothed his hair back from his forehead. I don't know, baby. The farm. It might not be safe anymore. Because of what's in the ground? Yes. Elijah considered this with a seriousness beyond his years. Then we'll make a new home, somewhere they can't find us. Amara kissed his forehead, fighting back tears. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a big day. In the next room, Caleb sat cleaning a weapon with methodical precision, his face illuminated by the glow of Tessa's laptop as she compiled their evidence into a comprehensive report. You know they'll come with everything they have once this goes public, she warned him. Caleb's hands never paused in their work. Let them come, he said, quietly. They came for the wrong family. Dawn broke with an unusual silence over the motel. Caleb had been awake for hours, methodically preparing for what would come. 3 days had passed since the confrontation at the abandoned factory. 3 days of careful planning, gathering allies, and fortifying their position. Today, they would take the fight directly to their enemies. Are you sure about this? Amara asked, watching her brother check his equipment. All non-lethal, but effective. "We're past the point of caution," Caleb replied. "They've shown their hand. Now we show ours." Their plan began with a series of coordinated disruptions. At precisely 8 a.m., the power to the sheriff's department mysteriously failed. Backup generators refused to start. Radio communications became unreliable, filled with static and phantom voices. Computer systems crashed, losing hours of data. Mr. Whitmore played his part, delivering coffee to the deputies with a sympathetic smile. "Technical difficulties, huh? Shame about that." The elderly man had access to places no one would think to question, moving freely through the building as he'd done for decades. While the sheriff's department scrambled to restore order, Caleb led a small team to the county jail. Using security codes provided by Carmen's cousin who worked in maintenance, they bypassed the main entrance. The night guard, no fan of Sheriff Horton after being repeatedly passed over for promotion, conveniently took an extended bathroom break. Carmen sat up in surprise when her cell door slid open. "Took you long enough," she said with a grin. "Topic was hell," Caleb replied, handing her a change of clothes. "We have 3 minutes before the cameras come back online." They slipped out through the laundry room, leaving behind a simple note on the guard's desk. Justice. Across town, Tessa was implementing the second phase of their plan. Her exposé on Vanguard Dominion had gone live at midnight, a comprehensive investigation linking the corporation to suspicious land grabs nationwide. By morning, it had been picked up by major news outlets. Vanguard Criminals was trending on social media, comments sections filled with similar stories from communities across the country. The article featured Amara prominently, a single mother fighting to protect her heritage against corporate corruption. The story resonated far beyond their small town, drawing attention from state officials and civil rights organizations. Within hours, the governor's office issued a statement promising an investigation. Sheriff Horton watched his carefully constructed world crumbling from his office window. The power had been restored, but the damage was done. Carmen's escape was an embarrassment. The exposure of his connection to Vanguard threatened everything. His phone rang constantly. Reporters, officials, angry citizens demanding answers. When it rang again, he answered with a snarl. "What?" "You've failed me, Sheriff." The voice belonged to Senator Grayson, Vanguard's silent partner. "I warned you what would happen if this situation wasn't contained." "I can still fix this," Horton insisted. "No, you can't." The senator's tone was ice. "Clean it up, all of it, immediately." The call ended abruptly, leaving Horton with the realization that he had become expendable. He gathered his most loyal deputies, men who were as compromised as he was, and made a desperate decision. "We're executing the warrant at the Williams farm. Tonight." Full tactical response. Deputy Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, with all the attention on us right now." "That's exactly why we move now," Horton cut him off. "While they're distracted with their media circus, we seize the property, secure those caves, and destroy whatever evidence remains." "And the family?" another deputy asked. Horton's expression darkened. "They've been deemed domestic terrorists. We respond accordingly." Caleb had anticipated this reaction. While Carmen recovered at a safe house, he, Amara, and a small group of trusted allies prepared the farm for the coming assault. The land that had sustained generations of their family would now become their fortress. "They'll come from the main road," Caleb explained, pointing to a hand-drawn map. Standard procedure would be to secure the house first, then fan out to the outbuildings. "What about Elijah?" Amara asked. Her son was currently with Tessa and David at a hotel in the next county, but the separation tore at her. "He stays where he is," Caleb said firmly. "This is no place for him tonight." As darkness fell, they took their positions. Mr. Whitmore and 2 other elderly farmers, men whose presence on country roads would raise no suspicion, parked their trucks strategically to monitor approaching vehicles. Carmen's network of Friends established a perimeter of watchful eyes. Amara surveyed the farm that had defined her entire life, now transformed into a battleground. "Dad would never have believed this," she murmured. "I don't know," Caleb replied. "He always said this land was worth fighting for. Just didn't know how literal that would become." At 11:42 p.m., the warning came through their makeshift communication system. Multiple vehicles approaching, lights off. The battle for the truth was about to begin. Sheriff Horton led the convoy personally, 12 men in total, armed as if for war. They parked half a mile out and approached on foot, using the cover of darkness in the surrounding woods. Their first indication that they'd been anticipated came when they triggered Caleb's perimeter alarms. Simple but effective tripwires connected to wind chimes. "They know we're coming," Reynolds whispered. "Doesn't matter," Horton replied. "We outnumber them." What Horton failed to understand was that Caleb had spent years training for asymmetrical warfare. The farm had been prepared with the same attention to detail he'd used to protect forward operating bases in hostile territory. As the deputies advanced, they encountered a series of obstacles: hidden pits covered with brush, noise traps that disoriented them, even sprinkler systems rigged to spray a mixture of water and farm chemicals that burned the eyes and skin. "What the hell is this?" one deputy coughed, eyes streaming. "Keep moving," Horton ordered. When they finally reached the farmhouse, they found it dark and seemingly deserted. Horton signaled for his men to surround it. "Breach on my mark." The front door splintered under the impact of a battering ram. Deputies poured in, weapons raised, only to find empty rooms. No furniture, no people. Just battery-powered speakers that suddenly blared with deafening sirens, disorienting the intruders. Outside, Caleb's counterattack began. From hidden positions around the property, he and his allies used non-lethal tactics: flashbang devices salvaged from his military days, high-powered spotlights that blinded night vision equipment, and smoke canisters that made accurate movement impossible. In the confusion, deputies fired wildly, hitting nothing but air and tree trunks. Their formation broke down as panic set in. 3 men retreated to the vehicles. 2 more became separated in the smoke. Amara, positioned in the old corn silo with a clear view of the chaos, watched with a mixture of pride and horror as her brother systematically dismantled a supposedly professional police operation. When the smoke cleared, 7 deputies had fled the scene entirely. The remaining 5, including Horton, found themselves surrounded by Caleb's group, farmers and townspeople, armed with nothing more threatening than pitchforks and shotguns, but determined in their stance. "This ends now," Caleb announced, emerging from the shadows. "Your backup isn't coming. Your communications have been jammed, and every second of this is being recorded for the world to see." Sheriff Horton, cornered and desperate, raised his weapon. "I'm still the law here." "Not anymore," came a new voice. State police vehicles appeared on the main road, lights flashing. The governor's investigation had moved faster than anyone anticipated, spurred by Tessa's reporting and evidence provided by David from the hard drive. As Horton was taken into custody by state authorities, he spat one final warning at Caleb. "You have no idea what you've done. Vanguard doesn't lose. They'll send others." Caleb leaned in close. "I'm counting on it." During the confusion, one of Horton's deputies, a man Caleb hadn't accounted for, slipped away unnoticed. He made it to a hidden satellite phone and delivered a simple message: "Operation compromised. Williams Farm secure. Requesting cleaning team." Inside an unmarked office in Washington, Senator Grayson received the message and made a call of his own. "Implement the contingency plan immediately." By morning, news crews had descended on the Williams farm. The corrupt sheriff's arrest. The brave family who stood their ground. The mysterious government experiments. It made for compelling television. Amara stood awkwardly before the cameras, unused to attention, while Caleb stayed carefully out of frame. As the initial frenzy began to fade, Carmen arrived with Elijah, who ran to his mother's arms. "Is it over?" he asked, his small face hopeful. Before Amara could answer, Caleb's hand fell on the boy's shoulder. "Not quite, little man. But we've won the first round." Tessa joined them, laptop under her arm. "You've gone viral," she told Amara. "People are sharing your story everywhere. Lawyers are calling, offering to represent you pro bono against Vanguard." "What happens now?" Carmen asked. "Now," Caleb said firmly, "we prepare for their countermove, because it's coming." Their victory proved short-lived. 3 days after Sheriff Horton's arrest, the first signs of Vanguard's response appeared. Tax records for the Williams farm were reviewed, resulting in claims of years of underpayment. Health department officials suddenly expressed concern about potential contamination from the farm's products. Most telling, state environmental experts arrived to investigate hazardous conditions requiring immediate evacuation. "They're using the system against us," Tessa observed as they gathered in an abandoned hunting cabin 10 miles from the farm. Caleb had insisted they relocate after noticing surveillance drones over the property. "It's what they do best," Caleb agreed. "When brute force fails, they use bureaucracy." The cabin had once served as a meeting place for civil rights organizers in the 1960s. Hidden in dense forest, its existence had been nearly forgotten, except by Mr. Whitmore, whose father had built it. "My daddy called it the resistance bunker," the old man had explained when offering it as a safe house. "Said some things need to stay off the books." Now it sheltered them as they planned their next moves. Maps and documents covered every surface. David had set up a secure communication system using equipment Caleb had acquired through channels he refused to explain. "They can't simply seize the land now," Amara said, studying their options. "There's too much public attention." "No, but they can make it uninhabitable," Carmen pointed out. "Force evacuation due to public safety concerns until people forget about us." Their discussion was interrupted by the arrival of Mr. Whitmore, who had been in town gathering supplies and information. "Bad news," he announced grimly. "Military types in town, not regular army, private contractors, asking questions about all of you." Caleb's expression hardened. "How many?" "At least a dozen that I saw. More arriving." Whitmore hesitated. "There's something else. They showed me a picture of my grandson. He's stationed overseas. Said they could arrange for him to come home, safe. Or not." The implications hung heavy in the air. "They're threatening your family," Amara said softly. Whitmore nodded, shame evident in his downcast eyes. "I didn't tell them nothing, but I can't say what I might do if they push harder." Caleb placed a hand on the old man's shoulder. "We understand. It might be better if you don't know our next moves anyway." After Whitmore left, tension filled the cabin. "Can we trust him?" Carmen asked bluntly. "Trust isn't binary," Caleb replied. "He's being squeezed between loyalty and family. The question isn't whether he'll break, but when." They decided to relocate that night, separating into smaller groups to reduce risk. Caleb, Amara, and Elijah would head deeper into the forest. Carmen would return to town, leveraging her apparent freedom to gather intelligence. Tessa and David would take the hard drive evidence to a secure location. The plan unraveled just after midnight. As they prepared to leave, headlights swept through. The trees, vehicles surrounded the cabin. Radio chatter indicated a full tactical team. "They found us," Caleb said, moving instantly to defensive mode. "Whitmore." "He wouldn't," Amara protested. "He did what any grandfather would do." Caleb's voice held no blame. "Carmen, Tessa, take the South Trail with the evidence. We'll create a diversion." Carmen hesitated. "You'll be captured." "No," Caleb replied with deadly certainty. "We won't." What followed was a masterclass in evasion tactics. While their allies escaped to the south, Caleb led Amara and Elijah through a hidden tunnel beneath the cabin that emptied into a ravine. They moved through the darkness with practiced efficiency, using the terrain to their advantage. Behind them, the tactical team breached an empty cabin, finding only cold coffee cups and a crude drawing of a middle finger. Caleb's parting message. The pursuit was relentless. Helicopters with thermal imaging joined the search at dawn. Dogs tracked their scent to a stream where Caleb had them wade through water for half a mile before emerging onto rocky ground that held no tracks. By mid-morning, they'd reached an old fire watchtower abandoned by the Forestry Service years earlier. From this vantage point, Caleb surveyed their pursuers through binoculars. Vanguard's private security, he confirmed. Military training. They're sweeping in a standard search pattern. How long can we keep running? Amara asked, watching Elijah sleep, exhausted from their night trek. We're not running, Caleb corrected her. We're leading them away from the others. There's a difference. Their respite was brief. By noon, the search had expanded to include the watchtower sector. As they prepared to move again, Elijah spotted the first team approaching through the trees. They descended the tower's backside, using the dense forest for cover. Hours of cat and mouse followed, with Caleb employing every evasion technique, from his special forces training. When direct escape wasn't possible, he created distractions, small controlled fires, noisemakers planted in hollow trees, false trails leading nowhere. As dusk approached, they found temporary shelter in a natural cave formation. Elijah's breathing had grown labored from the exertion, his asthma aggravated by stress and pollen. We need to get him medication, Amara whispered, holding her son close. Caleb's expression was grim. I know, but we can't risk a pharmacy. The decision was made for them when Elijah's condition worsened. Reluctantly, Caleb used their emergency phone to contact Carmen. We need help, he admitted. Elijah's asthma. How fast can you reach us? Carmen's response was immediate. I'll find you. 2 hours max. True to her word, Carmen appeared at their location with Elijah's medication and surprising news. Whitmore's dead. What? Amara gasped. Official story is suicide, but nobody's buying it. He left a letter, though. With Tessa. Carmen handed Caleb a sealed envelope. He knew they'd force him to betray you. Did it on his terms. Inside the envelope was a map of the county records office, with specific file numbers circled in red ink. A note in Whitmore's shaky handwriting read, The real ownership records. Follow the money to 1963. He gave us his last lead, Caleb said softly. At the cost of his life. While Elijah recovered from his attack, Carmen shared what she'd learned in town. State agencies were backing off the Williams farm, not out of benevolence but because Senator Grayson had directly intervened, claiming jurisdiction for a federal task force. It's a cover-up, Carmen explained. They're planning to declare the entire area a hazardous waste zone. No access, no investigations, everything buried under bureaucracy and national security restrictions. The news hit Amara hard. So we lose either way. Even if we keep the land, we can't live there. Not necessarily, Caleb said, studying Whitmore's. These records might prove the government knew about the contamination all along. If we can establish that they deliberately poisoned the land and covered it up, then it becomes the biggest environmental racism case in history. Tessa finished, having arrived during their discussion. Class action lawsuit material, hundreds of families affected across generations. Their planning was interrupted by a distant crack, a twig snapping under weight. Caleb motioned for silence, moving to the cave entrance with practiced stealth. Company, he whispered. Multiple hostiles. They've found us. Carmen handed Amara a small canister. Pepper spray. Use it if you have to. They prepared to split up again. Caleb would lead the pursuers away while the others escaped with Elijah. But as they gathered their meager belongings, a familiar figure appeared at the cave entrance. I believe you have something that belongs to me, said Senator Grayson, flanked by armed men in tactical gear. The hard drive, the journal, all of it now. Caleb moved with blinding speed, disarming the nearest guard. but he stopped when another man pressed a gun to Elijah's head. "Enough heroics," Grayson snapped. "You've become a significant irritation, Mr. Williams. Your sister refused reasonable offers. You exposed operations that served national security. All for what? A worthless piece of contaminated land?" "Not worthless to us," Amara replied defiantly. "That land is our heritage." "Heritage," Grayson scoffed. "Do you have any idea what's actually in those caves? The compounds we developed there have protected American interests for decades. Sacrifices were necessary." "Human sacrifices," Tessa added bitterly. "Black and brown bodies used as test subjects. The Moss." Senator shrugged. "History is full of necessary evils. Now, the evidence. All of it." As Caleb begrudgingly reached for his pack, a commotion erupted outside the cave. Shouts, gunfire, then silence. A new voice called from the entrance. "Federal agents, lower your weapons." The standoff dissolved into chaos as FBI agents swarmed the cave. Senator Grayson was taken into custody, his protests about national security falling on deaf ears. The lead agent approached Amara. "Ms. Williams, I'm Agent Daniels. We've been building a case against Vanguard Dominion for months. Your brother's evidence broke it open." "My brother?" Amara turned to Caleb in confusion. Caleb's expression was unreadable. "I may have sent copies of everything to an old contact at the Bureau before I died. Insurance policy." As they emerged from the cave into moonlight, Amara looked at her brother with new understanding. The man who had returned to her was not the same one who had left years ago. He carried shadows she might never fully comprehend. "It was never just about the land, was it?" she asked quietly. Caleb stared into the distance, where the lights of their farm might be visible on a clearer night. "No," he admitted. "It was about justice, about making them pay for what they did to our family, to all the families, and now we rebuild. Not just the farm. Everything." 2 weeks after the cave confrontation, the Williams family found themselves at the center of a storm they never could have imagined. Senator Grayson's arrest had sent shockwaves through Washington. 3 Vanguard Dominion executives were in federal custody. The company's stock had plummeted as investors fled the scandal, yet despite these victories, their most important battle remained: the fight for their home. "They're still trying to declare the farm uninhabitable," Amara explained to the small crowd gathered in the basement of Bethel AME Church. "Federal agencies, state officials, they've all determined the land is too contaminated for human habitation." The basement was packed with faces both familiar and new: local farmers, Carmen's network of allies, and representatives from communities across the state facing similar struggles with corporate land grabs. What had begun as one family's stand had evolved into a movement. "That's their new strategy," Tessa added. "They couldn't force you off with intimidation or legal manipulation, so now they'll use environmental regulations to achieve the same goal." Carmen stood up, her imposing frame commanding attention. "They contaminated our land, poisoned our communities, and now they want to protect us by taking everything? I don't think so." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. What had once been fear was now righteous anger. The town's marginalized citizens, those who had lived in the shadows, accepting mistreatment as inevitable, were finding their voices. Caleb, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. "This isn't just about one family or one farm anymore. This is about generations of injustice, about powerful interests deciding who deserves rights and who doesn't." His voice carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to command. "We have evidence, we have truth, and now we have numbers. The question is, are we ready to use them?" The response was immediate and unanimous. People who had spent lifetimes keeping their heads down were standing up, volunteering resources, offering skills. A retired paralegal promised to help with paperwork. Local mechanics offered vehicles. Farm workers knew the land better than any government inspector ever could. Then we make our stand, Caleb announced. Not with violence, but with unbreakable resolve. They expect us to surrender, to walk away quietly. We're going to show them exactly how wrong they are. The plan took shape over the next 3 days. While FBI investigations continued, Vanguard's remaining allies within the government were working to contain the damage. Their solution: a complete lockdown of the Williams farm and surrounding properties, ostensibly for public safety testing. They'll arrive Monday morning, Tessa informed them after speaking with her contacts. Full hazmat teams, government, officials, media carefully selected for sympathetic coverage. They're calling it environmental response and community protection. More like evidence removal and cover-up procedures, Carmen muttered. Caleb studied the satellite maps of the property. Then we need to be in position Sunday night. Once they establish a perimeter, it'll be too late. Sunday evening saw a remarkable migration to the Williams farm. People arrived in small groups, taking back roads and forest paths to avoid detection. By nightfall, over 100 community members had assembled, setting up a peaceful but determined human barrier around the property. Elijah watched in amazement as the farm transformed. Tents appeared in the fields. Cooking fires dotted the landscape. Children played while adults established watch points and communication networks. For the first time in his young life, he saw his mother's land as more than just their isolated home. It was becoming the heart of a community. "Uncle Caleb," he asked, finding his uncle checking security cameras. "Are all these people here for us?" Caleb paused, choosing his words carefully. "They're here for themselves too, little man. Sometimes people need a rallying point. Something that represents all the injustices they've faced. Right now, that's our farm." Dawn on Monday revealed the full scale of their resistance. Community members had formed concentric circles around the property, arms linked, many wearing T-shirts hastily printed with "Our Land, Our Truth." Local churches had provided food and water stations. Handmade signs declared, "Justice for Williams." Farm and no more cover-ups. When the government convoy arrived, led by hazmat vehicles and followed by news vans, they found not a deserted property to quietly cordon off, but a massive, peaceful demonstration. At the center of it all stood Amara, Caleb, and Carmen, flanked by community leaders both black and white. The official in charge, a stern woman from the Environmental Protection Agency, approached the human chain with visible frustration. "This area has been designated for emergency environmental assessment. You're obstructing a federal operation." Amara stepped forward. "This farm has been in my family for generations. If there are environmental concerns, we have the right to independent testing before any government action." "The contamination has already been confirmed," the official countered. "By the same government that caused it?" Tessa emerged from the crowd, press credentials visible. "That seems like a conflict of interest." As cameras rolled, the confrontation escalated. Officials threatened arrests. Community members held firm. What the government had planned as a quiet takeover was becoming a media spectacle they couldn't control. The standoff might have turned violent if not for an unexpected development. 3 black SUVs arrived, and from them emerged a team of attorneys, representing the NACP Legal Defense Fund, Environmental Justice Alliance, and the Civil Liberties Union. "My clients are exercising their constitutional rights to peaceful assembly and protection of property," announced the lead attorney. "Furthermore, we've filed an emergency injunction against any federal action pending independent environmental assessment." The officials retreated to regroup, visibly rattled by the organized resistance and legal intervention. What followed was a day of tense negotiations, with the community refusing to disperse and the government unwilling to risk the optics of mass arrests. By sunset, a compromise had been reached. Independent environmental experts would be permitted to test the land, alongside government officials. No action would be taken until results were verified by both parties. Most importantly, the Williams family would retain access to their property throughout the process. As the crowd celebrated this small victory, Caleb remained vigilant. "This isn't over," he told Amara quietly. "They've just changed tactics again." His suspicion proved justified. That night, as most supporters returned to their homes, Caleb's security system detected movement at the far edge of the property, near the cave entrance. Silent figures in tactical gear were establishing positions around the farm. "They're going to raid tonight," he realized. While everyone's guard is down, Amara's face hardened with resolve. "Then we'll be ready." Through their network of allies, word spread rapidly. Within an hour, supporters began returning to the farm. This time, they came prepared for a night watch. Headlights illuminated the property as trucks and cars formed a protective circle. Spotlights were positioned to eliminate hiding places. Inside the house, Caleb briefed a core group of defenders. "They want the caves, access to whatever's still hidden down there. We need to hold them off until morning, when the media and lawyers return." Carmen had transformed the kitchen into a command center, coordinating lookouts via walkie-talkies. Tessa was live-streaming everything, ensuring that any aggression would be broadcast instantly to thousands of followers. The attack came at 2:17 a.m., a coordinated push from multiple directions. Black-clad figures emerged from the darkness, expecting to encounter sleeping protesters. Instead, they found the farm ablaze with light and buzzing with activity. "Federal agents," they announced, though their lack of identifying markings told a different story. "This is a matter of national security." Caleb recognized the tactics immediately. "Vanguard contractors," he told Amara, last-ditch effort to secure the site. What followed was not the easy operation the intruders had planned. At every turn, they faced passive resistance, bodies linking arms, cameras recording their every move, witnesses ready to document any violence. When they attempted to approach the cave entrance, they found it blocked by a human chain 3 rows deep. Their commander, frustrated by the unexpected resistance, made a critical error. He ordered his men to use force to clear a path. The moment the first protester was shoved to the ground, dozens of phones captured the assault. Tessa's live-stream viewer count jumped into the thousands. Within minutes, social media exploded with outrage. By dawn, the tide had turned completely. News helicopters circled overhead. The attempted night raid had backfired spectacularly, generating precisely the attention Vanguard had hoped to avoid. When official FBI vehicles arrived to investigate, reports of unmarked federal agents, the contractors were caught in an untenable position. The farm had held. The caves remained secured. And most importantly, the truth could no longer be buried. As morning sunlight bathed the property, Amara found Caleb sitting alone on their father's old porch swing, watching the activity with tired eyes. "You did it," she said, joining him. "You saved our land." Caleb shook his head. "No, we all did. Everyone who stood with us." For the first time since his return, Amara saw her brother truly smile. Not the tight, controlled expression he usually wore, but something genuine that reached his eyes. "Dad would be proud," she whispered. "Of you," Caleb corrected. "You held on when most would have broken. You kept his legacy alive." As they sat together watching their supporters celebrate, Elijah appeared with a handful of wildflowers he'd picked from the edge of the fields. "For the land," he explained, scattering them on the porch steps like an offering. "Great-grandpa's journal said we should always thank the earth for taking care of us." The summer heat had given way to autumn's gentle coolness by the time the IA final investigations concluded. The Williams farm stood at the center of the largest environmental justice lawsuit in the nation's history. Thousands of families across multiple states had joined the class action against both Vanguard Dominion and the federal government. The independent testing had confirmed what they already knew. Decades of secret military experiments had left chemical compounds in the soil and groundwater. But the findings had also revealed something unexpected. Nature was healing itself. In areas left undisturbed, microorganisms had evolved to break down the contaminants. The land was slowly recovering, On a crisp October morning, Amara stood in the center of what had once been their cornfield. Now it held rows of wooden crosses and stone markers, a memorial to those who had suffered over generations. In remembrance of those who were not asked, read the central monument, "May truth bring healing." Behind her, a crowd gathered for the dedication ceremony. Families whose loved ones had died from mysterious cancers and respiratory diseases. Communities whose complaints had been dismissed as paranoia. People seeking acknowledgement after decades of being ignored. "My grandfather always said something was wrong with the water," an elderly woman told Amara, clutching her hand. Nobody believed him. They called him crazy. Now we know. Caleb watched from the edge of the gathering, uncomfortable with crowds, but unwilling to miss this moment. Agent Daniels approached him, extending a hand. "The Bureau has officially cleared your record," she informed him. "Your death has been, shall we say, administratively corrected. You're a free man, Mr. Williams." "And my future? There's a place for someone with your skills if you're interested. The task force investigating other Vanguard sites needs experienced operators." Caleb considered the offer, watching Elijah help an elderly man to his seat. "I might be," he said finally, "but my family comes first now." The ceremony was simple but powerful. Community leaders spoke of loss and resilience. Church choirs sang songs of hope and healing. When it was Amara's turn to speak, she approached the podium with quiet dignity. "This land has carried many burdens," she began. "The weight of labor from those who worked it, the weight of dreams from those who cherished it, and the weight of secrets from those who abused it." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "Today, we lift that last weight. We bring secrets into the light. We honor those who were harmed, and we begin the work of true healing." The settlement negotiations continued for months, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The evidence was too damning, the public outrage too great. Vanguard Dominion would cease to exist, its assets dissolved to fund cleanup efforts and compensate victims. Government agencies would be restructured, with new oversight to prevent similar abuses. For the Williams family, the victory came with both vindication and responsibility. Their farm couldn't simply return to what it had been, not with the knowledge they now carried. "We need to reimagine this place," Amara explained to Elijah as they planted seedlings in a test garden. Scientists had developed special varieties that could detoxify the soil as they grew. "It won't just be our home anymore. It needs to be something more." The something more took shape gradually. The family retained ownership of the land, but with a new vision. Areas still contaminated were cordoned off for natural regeneration. Clean sections became community gardens where families could grow food together. The farmhouse transformed into an educational center, documenting both the history of abuse and the path toward healing. Carmen found her own role in the transformation. When the special election was called to replace the disgraced officials, she surprised everyone by running for mayor. "Someone who knows the truth needs to be in charge," she declared at her campaign launch, held on the Williams farm. "Someone who remembers what happened and won't let it happen again." Her victory speech, delivered on a snowy December evening, acknowledged the challenging road ahead. "This town has wounds that won't heal overnight, trust that won't rebuild in a day. But we start now, together, with truth as our foundation." Tessa's journalism career soared following her coverage of the scandal. Major outlets competed for her work, offering prestigious positions in New York and Washington. To everyone's surprise, she declined them all, choosing instead to establish an independent news cooperative based in the county. "The next time something like this happens," she explained, "people need a trusted source of information. Not corporate media that can be pressured or bought, but journalists embedded in and accountable to the community." Her first major project, a documentary series tracking the Williams farm's transformation from toxic legacy to healing ground. For Caleb, adjustment to civilian life came slowly. The hypervigilance that had kept him alive for years didn't fade easily. But working alongside Elijah, teaching the boy practical skills while learning gentleness in return, gradually softened his edges. When the military offered him formal reinstatement, with honors acknowledging the wrongful persecution that had forced him underground, Caleb declined. "My war is over," he told the officials. "I'm needed here." Instead, he channeled his tactical knowledge into creating security protocols for other communities fighting environmental injustice. His network of veterans formed a protection team that deployed to vulnerable sites across the country, teaching local residents how to document abuses and defend their rights peacefully. Elijah thrived amid the changes. Freed from isolation, he blossomed in the community school Carmen established. His asthma improved as the farm's air quality slowly recovered. The quiet, fearful boy transformed into a confident young person with an uncanny ability to explain complex environmental concepts to visitors. His project to document the farm story through art began small, just sketches and paintings displayed in the farmhouse. But when visitors began requesting copies, Amara helped him compile them into a book that told their family's journey from persecution to triumph. "Why did you draw this part?" she asked him one evening, pointing to a particularly dark illustration of the burning barn. "Because we have to remember the bad parts too," he replied with wisdom beyond his years. "That's how we make sure they don't happen again." By spring, new life had returned to the Williams farm. The memorial stood as a solemn reminder of the past, but around it, wildflowers pushed through soil that was slowly healing itself. Community garden plots buzzed with activity as families planted together. The reconstituted barn, rebuilt through a community effort, housed educational exhibits and meeting spaces. On the anniversary of the night Caleb had returned, the family gathered on the porch to watch the sunset. Carmen joined them, taking a rare evening away from mayoral duties. Tessa arrived with freshly printed copies of Elijah's book. Even Agent Daniel stopped by, bringing news that 3 more Vanguard testing sites had been identified and would be investigated. As twilight settled over the fields, Amara surveyed all they had built from the ashes of what was nearly lost. The far land remained in their family, but its purpose had expanded. No longer an isolated homestead, but the beating heart of a community finding its voice. "This land was always ours," she said softly, watching Elijah explain his latest artwork to visitors gathered in the yard. "Now, the whole world knows it." Caleb nodded, his expression peaceful in a way it hadn't been since his return. "And more importantly, so do we. What price would you pay to protect your legacy? What truths would you unearth to save your family? If this story of resilience against corruption moved you, please like and subscribe for more powerful narratives that challenge us to question what we'd sacrifice for justice.